The inspiring journey of Colonel Harland Sanders. Harland David Sanders, famously known as Colonel Sanders, built his success from hardship, hunger, and heart. Born in 1890 in Indiana, he lost his father at a young age. His mother worked long hours, leaving Harland to care for his siblings and cook meals. That's where his love for cooking began, out of necessity, not luxury. The lessons of struggle taught him self-reliance and hard work, values that shaped his future empire. As a young man, Sanders drifted from job to job: railroad worker, insurance salesman, ferry operator, but lost many due to his fiery temper or bad luck. Yet every failure taught him persistence. When he opened a small gas station in Corbin, Kentucky, he began serving homemade fried chicken to travelers. People loved it so much that it became more popular than the gas. That small act turned into a life-changing idea. Good food brings people together. Sanders perfected a special fried chicken recipe using 11 herbs and spices, a secret that remains hidden even today. He wore his signature white suit and bow tie to symbolize cleanliness, pride, and Southern hospitality. Becoming the Colonel, people instantly recognized and trusted. But life tested him again. When a new highway bypassed his restaurant, his business collapsed. At 65, nearly broke, most people would have quit. Instead, Sanders packed his pressure cooker and recipe, traveling door to door to sell his chicken to restaurant owners. He faced hundreds of rejections before one said yes. That one yes started the first KFC franchise in 1952. Sanders' vision was simple: not to run one restaurant, but to share his chicken everywhere. He franchised KFC, offering his recipe to others and earning a small fee for each sale. Within a few years, his chicken was served nationwide. By the time he was in his 70s, he had built a multi-million-dollar brand, all from a single recipe and unshakable belief. In 1964, Sanders sold KFC for $2 million, but remained the company's ambassador. Even in old age, he traveled thousands of miles each year to visit franchisees, ensuring his legacy of quality continued. After his death in 1980, KFC became a global giant with over 17,000 restaurants in 115 countries. But Colonel Sanders' true legacy wasn't just fried chicken. It was faith, perseverance, and generosity. He believed in giving back, supporting education, disaster relief, and communities through the KFC Foundation. Around the world, KFC adapts to local cultures, serving rice in Asia, potato sandwiches in India, and shrimp donuts in Thailand. Yet the spirit of the Colonel remains the same. His story proves that success doesn't depend on age, luck, or perfect conditions. It's built on grit, service, and never giving up, even when life reroutes your highway. What made Harland Sanders start cooking and serving food at a gas station? Success doesn't always begin with a grand plan. Sometimes it starts with an unexpected opportunity. For Harland Sanders, the idea of cooking and serving food didn't come from a business strategy, but from pure necessity, creativity, and a desire to help others. In the early 1930s, Sanders was running a small Shell gas station in Corbin, Kentucky. Times were tough. America was going through the Great Depression, and people were struggling just to get by. Gas stations in small towns barely made enough money to survive. Sanders knew that if he relied only on fuel sales, his business would eventually fail, just like many of his earlier attempts. But Harland Sanders was not a man who waited for luck. He created it. Customers who stopped for gas were often travelers and hard-working families on long journeys. They were tired, hungry, and far from home. Sanders noticed this, and instead of watching them drive away to find meals elsewhere, he thought, "Why don't I feed them right here?" With no restaurant, no kitchen staff, and no official dining space, he used what he had: his own home. He began cooking simple Southern meals: fried chicken, country ham, biscuits, and green beans. He served people right at the gas station, sometimes on the family's own dining table. At first, it wasn't a business move. It was his way of making customers feel cared for. But word spread fast. Travelers began telling others, "There's a gas station in Corbin where the owner cooks the best fried chicken you'll ever taste." Soon, people didn't come just for fuel. They came for Harlan's food. The small living room dinners grew into a side business, then a full cafe, and eventually, the famous Sanders Cafe. What truly made Sanders start cooking wasn't hunger for money. It was his hunger to serve. His story teaches a powerful lesson.
Great success often starts when you do more than what is required. Sanders could have stayed an ordinary gas station owner, but he chose to give people a reason to remember him. And that spark became the beginning of the global KFC empire. How did his difficult childhood shape his future success? Great success often comes from great struggle, and Harlan Sanders' childhood was filled with challenges that shaped his character, mindset, and unstoppable determination. Harlan was born in 1890 in rural Indiana to a poor family. Life demanded responsibility from him early. When he was just 6 years old, tragedy struck. His father passed away suddenly. His mother had to work long hours to support the family, leaving young Harlan to cook, clean, and take care of his younger siblings. While other children played, Harlan was learning how to survive. Instead of seeing cooking as a burden, he embraced it. He experimented in the kitchen, learned to prepare vegetables, bread, and meats, and by age 7, he had mastered many family meals. Without knowing it, he was building the very skill that would later make him world famous. School was another challenge. Sanders struggled to fit into the traditional education system. He endured conflicts with teachers and eventually dropped out in 7th grade. Most would assume his future was doomed. No father, poor home, no education. But instead of giving up, Harlan learned something more valuable than any school could teach: resourcefulness. From a young age, he worked any job he could find: farming, painting, railroads, streetcar conductor, insurance sales, and more. These early hardships taught him resilience, discipline, and the ability to handle rejection without breaking. He was fired multiple times, faced failure repeatedly, and experienced financial instability for decades. But instead of losing hope, his tough childhood had trained him to keep moving forward. The difficulties taught him 3 life-changing lessons. 1. Responsibility builds leadership. Taking care of siblings at 6 made him grow up fast. Later, this helped him lead employees, train restaurant owners, and build a franchise system. 2. Hardships build skills. Cooking to survive led to culinary mastery, the foundation of his empire. 3. Struggle builds strength. Because life was never easy for Sanders, he developed grit. That grit would carry him through failures even in his 50s and 60s.
Why did Sanders lose so many jobs in his early life? Before Colonel Sanders became a global icon, he went through a long series of failed jobs, more than most people experience in a lifetime. Many assume this was a sign of incompetence, but in reality, these failures built the foundation for his later success. When Harlan Sanders entered the workforce as a child, he wasn't yet mature enough to understand discipline. At age 10, he worked his first farm job, but was fired for loafing. He got distracted by nature instead of clearing brush. This early firing embarrassed him deeply and taught him the consequences of not giving full effort. It planted the first seed of responsibility. As he grew older, Sanders worked in many different industries: farming, streetcar conductor, railroad laborer, blacksmith helper, soldier, insurance salesman, ferry boat operator, and more. The reason he lost or quit so many jobs was simple.
He didn't yet know what he was meant to do. He often clashed with bosses, struggled to stay interested in routine tasks, and was constantly searching for something better. Sanders wasn't lazy, he was restless, ambitious, and unwilling to settle. His personality didn't fit ordinary jobs. He also had a strong independent streak. Sanders didn't like strict rules, bosses, or limitations. He wanted freedom, the freedom to make decisions and run things his own way. This natural entrepreneurial spirit made it difficult for him to stay in jobs where he had no control. What many saw as a weakness was actually a sign that he was destined to lead, not follow. But losing jobs came with a price. Sanders had a wife and children to support, and job instability caused financial stress. Instead of giving up, each job taught him something: customer service, sales, cooking, management, discipline, and patience. These experiences eventually shaped the perfect entrepreneur. Most people would have lost confidence after so many failures, but Sanders learned one powerful truth: a job loss is not a life loss. It is a lesson redirecting you to your true path. The world remembers Sanders not for the 20-plus jobs he failed at, but for the one business he built that changed fast food forever. His early failures were not the end, they were training. How did a simple fried chicken recipe turn into a world-famous business? The story of how Colonel Harlan Sanders' simple fried chicken recipe became a global empire is one of the greatest business transformations in history, and it started in the most humble way: a small gas station kitchen in Kentucky. In the 1930s, Sanders wasn't trying to build a brand. He was simply trying to help travelers eat a warm, home-cooked meal. At his service station, instead of just selling gas, he cooked for customers using his childhood cooking skills. His fried chicken wasn't fancy. It was comfort food seasoned with love and Southern tradition. People tasted it once and came back again, then brought others. Word of mouth spread faster than advertising. But the key turning point came in 1939 when Sanders perfected his legendary recipe of 11 herbs and spices and developed a new cooking method. Traditional frying took too long, and customers hated waiting 30 minutes for chicken. So Sanders used a pressure cooker, an invention meant for vegetables, to fry chicken quickly while keeping it tender and juicy. This innovation changed everything. It wasn't just delicious, it was fast, at a time when America was moving toward convenience. For years, his restaurant became famous, but one disaster nearly destroyed him. In 1955, a new highway bypassed his cafe. Traffic vanished, customers disappeared. Sanders lost everything and was nearly broke at 65 years old. But this failure lit the spark that turned his recipe into a worldwide business. Instead of opening another restaurant, he chose a revolutionary path: franchising his recipe. He traveled across America with nothing but his pressure cooker and seasoning mix, frying chicken in restaurant kitchens to prove its taste. He faced rejection after rejection, more than 1,000 times, yet every no only pushed him to keep going. Finally, one owner said yes, and his Kentucky Fried Chicken began spreading state by state. KFC grew because it wasn't selling food, it was selling a distinct taste that no one else had. The flavor became iconic, the brand became trusted, and Sanders became the face of a new fast food era. A simple recipe turned into a world-famous business because Sanders believed in it more than anyone else. He didn't need a big investment, he needed persistence, innovation, and unshakable belief. Great ideas don't change the world, brave people who act on them do.
Why did Sanders start wearing the white suit and become known as the Colonel? Colonel Harlan Sanders' white suit and black string tie are among the most iconic looks in business history. But many people don't know the emotional and strategic reasons behind it. The white suit wasn't just clothing. It became a symbol of dignity, Southern hospitality, and the identity that transformed Harlan Sanders into the Colonel. The story begins in 1936, when the governor of Kentucky awarded Sanders the honorary title of Kentucky Colonel. This title wasn't a military rank. It was a recognition of his contribution to Kentucky's culture and cuisine. Sanders was deeply proud of this honor because for the first time in his life, someone saw value in his work. After decades of failure, job loss, heartbreak, and hardship, this title felt like respect he had earned through grit, not luck. However, it wasn't until 1949 that Sanders decided to fully embrace the identity of the Colonel. Up until then, he dressed in ordinary dark suits, but he realized something powerful. People don't just follow a product, they follow a personality, a story, a symbol. So Sanders reinvented himself. He began wearing a crisp white suit, a black string tie, and grew his goatee, a look inspired by Southern gentlemen of the old era. The white suit made him instantly recognizable, clean, classy, and trustworthy, the type of man who would serve food with pride. It wasn't just branding, it represented purity, quality, and Southern charm. The transformation had magic. Customers didn't just see a restaurant owner, they saw the Colonel, a character who embodied comfort, hospitality, and tradition. This visual identity became a marketing powerhouse. When he entered a restaurant, everyone noticed. When he appeared in advertisements, the suit made the brand unforgettable. The white suit also reflected his personal values, dignity, respect, and pride in one's work. It reminded him of how far he had come from a struggling farm boy to a respected figure. Even after selling KFC, he continued wearing the suit every day, because the suit no longer represented marketing, it represented him. The white suit wasn't a costume, it was the uniform of a man who finally became the person he always wanted to be.
What major challenges did Colonel Sanders face before KFC succeeded? Before the world knew him as the smiling man in the white suit, Colonel Harlan Sanders lived a life filled with failures, heartbreak, and constant struggle. His journey proves that success often arrives only after life tests you again and again. Colonel Sanders faced more challenges in one lifetime than most people could handle. Born in 1890 into poverty, he lost his father at just 5 years old. His mother worked long hours, leaving him to cook and care for his siblings. This is where his cooking skills began, but life didn't get easier. Sanders dropped out of school in 7th grade and spent years jumping between jobs: farmhand, streetcar conductor, railroad worker, soldier, insurance salesman, and even a lawyer for a short time. He was fired or failed at most of them. By the age of 40, when many people already build stable careers, Sanders was still struggling. But his turning point came when he began cooking for travelers at a small gas station in Corbin, Kentucky. People loved his food, and soon he opened a restaurant. But tragedy struck again. A fire burned it down. Sanders rebuilt it, and later a new highway bypassed his restaurant, destroying his business and leaving him nearly broke at 65. Imagine reaching 65 years old with a small Social Security check of just $105 per month, no business, and no savings. Most people would quit, but Sanders refused. Instead, he believed his chicken recipe still had potential. He traveled across America, often sleeping in his car, pitching his recipe to restaurant owners. He heard 1,009 no's before the first yes. That level of rejection would break almost anyone, but not him. He faced financial failure, business loss, family issues, and constant rejection. Yet each setback shaped his resilience, sharpened his vision, and strengthened his belief. Key challenges he overcame: childhood poverty and responsibility at a young age, multiple job failures and firings, business destroyed by fire, highway reroute that killed his restaurant, starting again at age 65 when most retire, 1,009 rejections before success. Sanders' life teaches one powerful lesson: your age, your failures, and your past don't define your destiny. Your perseverance does. Why did Colonel Sanders decide to franchise his chicken instead of running just one restaurant?
Colonel Harlan Sanders' decision to franchise his chicken recipe was not a business strategy at first. It was a survival plan. After losing his restaurant due to the highway rerouting, he realized that rebuilding from scratch would be expensive, time-consuming, and nearly impossible at his age. At 65 years old, with only $105 a month from Social Security, he needed a smarter way to rebuild his life. Colonel Sanders understood one important thing. If he couldn't bring people to his restaurant, he would take his chicken to the world. Running a single restaurant required money, staff, and infrastructure. He no longer had those resources. But what he did have was priceless, a unique fried chicken recipe with 11 herbs and spices that customers loved. Instead of starting another restaurant and fighting to attract customers again, he asked one powerful question.
What if other restaurants cooked my chicken and we both earned money? This idea became the franchising model. In 1952, Sanders approached Pete Harmon, a restaurant owner in Salt Lake City, Utah. Harmon tasted the chicken, loved it, and agreed to cook it in his restaurant using Sanders' method. They reached a deal. Harmon would pay Sanders 5 cents for every chicken sold. This became the first official KFC franchise, and it worked brilliantly. Harmon's sales skyrocketed, and the Kentucky Fried Chicken name was born. In 1953, Sanders had a conflict with a new 12 block and lost his business. He lost all of his savings and left with nothing but a small Social Security check. This was not the end of the story, but now Sanders had to figure out a new way to earn money. He made a decision that no one else had seen before. What if other restaurants cooked my chicken and we both earned money? This idea became the franchising model. In 1952, Sanders approached Pete Harmon, a restaurant owner in Salt Lake City, Utah. Harmon tasted the chicken, loved it, and agreed to cook it in his restaurant using Sanders' method. They reached a deal. Harmon would pay Sanders 5 cents for every chicken sold. This became the first official KFC franchise, and it worked brilliantly. Harmon's sales skyrocketed, and the Kentucky Fried Chicken name was born. Why franchising made more sense than running one restaurant? Running one restaurant versus franchising his recipe. Needed money, staff, building, and equipment. Needed only his recipe and training. Growth limited to one location. Could expand across states and nationwide. High financial risk, low cost, low risk, high reward. Time-consuming, scalable, and fast expansion. Franchising gave Sanders the freedom to travel, promote his recipe, and grow without being tied to one location. He could multiply his success by helping small restaurant owners boost their sales while earning income himself. It was a win-win model. Between age 65 and 75, he drove across America pitching his franchise idea. After 1,009 rejections, he finally secured multiple deals. By the early 1960s, hundreds of restaurants across the USA were serving Kentucky Fried Chicken. The genius behind his decision. Sanders understood something most people never realize. Owning 100% of one small business is less powerful than owning a piece of hundreds of successful ones. What challenges did Colonel Sanders face when convincing restaurants to sell his chicken? Convincing restaurants to sell his chicken was one of the toughest battles of Colonel Sanders' life. When he began franchising at age 65, he didn't have a company, a marketing team, money, or fame. All he had was a pressure cooker, his secret 11 herb and spice recipe, and a belief that his chicken could change the food industry. But turning that belief into a nationwide franchise was far from easy. 1. Constant rejection. Over 1,000 no's. Most restaurant owners laughed at the idea of paying a fee just to use someone else's fried chicken recipe. Sanders traveled from town to town across the U.S., slept in his car, and pitched his ideas door to door. He faced 1,009 rejections before someone finally agreed to a test.
Many owners simply didn't trust an elderly man claiming he had a special recipe that could boost their business. 2. Lack of credibility. In the early 1950s, Sanders was not yet the Colonel everyone knew. He was just a man in a white suit with a South End accent asking for 5 cents per chicken sold. Without fame or brand identity, people doubted him. Restaurant owners questioned, "Why should we use your recipe? What if it doesn't sell? Why should we share profits with you?" 3. Convincing owners to follow his method. Sanders had strict cooking rules. The chicken had to be cooked with his pressure frying method, exact seasoning measurements, and a precise process. Many restaurant owners didn't like being told how to run their kitchen. They wanted freedom, not instructions from a stranger. 4. Financial struggle on the road. Sanders used most of his tiny Social Security checks for gas and motel stays. When he couldn't afford either, he slept in his car. Every rejection didn't just hurt emotionally, it affected his ability to eat, travel, and keep going. Most people would have quit, but he didn't. 5. Competition and skepticism. Fried chicken wasn't new in America. Many restaurants already sold it. Owners believed their recipes were good enough, so they saw no reason to change. Sanders had to prove with taste, not words, that his was better. That's why he personally cooked the chicken for every owner he met.
Despite these challenges, Sanders' persistence paid off. He turned objections into opportunities by offering restaurant owners a way to increase profits with a product customers loved. How did Colonel Sanders go from almost broke at 65 to building a multi-million-dollar brand? Colonel Harlan Sanders' transformation from a nearly broke 65-year-old into the founder of a multi-million-dollar brand is one of the greatest comeback stories in American history. His journey proves that age is never a barrier to success, and persistence can rewrite your destiny, even when life repeatedly knocks you down. 1. Turning setback into opportunity. In 1955, when the highway rerouted away from his Corbin, Kentucky restaurant, Sanders lost the business he had spent decades building. After selling it, he was left with a small monthly Social Security check, just $105, barely enough to survive. Most people would have retired quietly, but Sanders refused to accept defeat. Instead, he looked at what he still had rather than what he lost. A perfected recipe of 11 herbs and spices, a unique pressure frying method, a belief that his chicken was unlike anything else. He realized that instead of owning one restaurant, he could license his recipe to many. 2. Inventing the franchising model for fried chicken. With little money but full determination, Sanders hit the road. He began traveling across America, pitching his recipe to restaurant owners. His offer was simple but revolutionary. He would teach them how to cook his chicken. In return, they paid him 5 cents for every chicken sold. This low-risk, high-profit model was attractive once owners tried the chicken and saw customer demand. 3. Winning through taste and consistency. Sanders knew words weren't enough. Taste had to prove value. Everywhere he went, he cooked fresh chicken for restaurant owners, employees, and customers. When owners saw long lines and repeat customers, they agreed to franchise. The more franchises he opened, the stronger the brand became. 4. Personal branding and the Colonel identity. To gain trust and stand out, Sanders adopted the iconic look: white suit, black string tie, mustache, and goatee. It wasn't just fashion, it was marketing genius. He became a living brand symbol that Americans recognized and respected. 5. Rapid growth to millions. By 1960, there were over 200 KFC franchises. In 1964, at age 74, Sanders sold the company for $2 million, about $20+ million today, while remaining its brand ambassador, a role he held proudly until his death.
Why did Colonel Sanders sell KFC after so much success? Selling Kentucky Fried Chicken was one of the hardest decisions Colonel Sanders ever made, but it was a practical and strategic choice that ultimately protected the brand's future.
Although he created KFC with passion, love, and personal effort, the business had grown far beyond what one man could manage, especially in his 70s. 1. The company became too big to handle alone. By the early 1960s, KFC was exploding across the United States and even expanding internationally. With more than 600 franchise locations, Sanders was suddenly not just a cook or a salesman. He was running a rapidly scaling corporation that required legal expertise, financial systems, corporate management, supply chain control, and global strategy. Colonel Sanders was a visionary and a master promoter, but he was not a corporate executive. He preferred the kitchen over the boardroom. Managing an empire was exhausting, especially at his age. 2. He wanted the brand to grow beyond his capabilities. Sanders understood that KFC had the potential to become a worldwide business, but it would require strong financial backing, modern corporate structure, and people experienced in large-scale operations. When young businessman and lawyer John Y. Brown Jr. and his partners approached Sanders with a serious offer, they promised to expand KFC far beyond what Sanders could do alone. They offered $2 million in 1964, over $20 million in today's value, a life-changing amount, especially for a man who was nearly broke less than 10 years earlier. Financial security and brand protection. Selling KFC wasn't about cashing out, it was about protecting the brand he built with love. As part of the deal, Sanders negotiated lifelong involvement. He received a yearly salary, later raised to $75,000. He retained the rights to KFC in Canada. He remained the brand's personality and ambassador. This allowed him to stay connected to KFC without dealing with exhausting corporate responsibilities. 4. Staying true to what he loved. After selling the company, Sanders focused on what made him happiest: traveling, visiting franchises, promoting KFC, talking to customers, and sharing his story. He remained the face of the brand, appearing in commercials, interviews, and public events across America. How did KFC grow into a global brand after Colonel Sanders sold it? When Colonel Sanders sold KFC in 1964, it marked the beginning of a massive transformation from a regional American fried chicken chain into a global fast food powerhouse. The new owners brought the business knowledge, corporate systems, and resources required to expand KFC far beyond what Sanders could do alone. What followed was a strategic, high-speed growth journey that turned KFC into one of the most recognized brands on earth. 1. Strong corporate leadership and funding. After purchasing KFC, John Y. Brown Jr. and his investor group scaled the company using modern franchising systems, marketing strategies, and brand-building campaigns. They focused on standardized cooking methods for consistency, expanding into new cities at record speed, ensuring franchisee training and support. This turned KFC into a well-organized corporation with nationwide presence across America. 2. Iconic branding and marketing. One of the smartest decisions was keeping Colonel Sanders as the face and spokesperson of the company. His white suit, black string tie, friendly Southern personality, and charm became a marketing goldmine. Appearing in commercials, talk shows, and interviews made KFC more than a restaurant. It became a story. Americans connected emotionally with the brand, which helped build trust and loyalty both at home and globally. 3. Going international. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, KFC began expanding internationally. The first overseas KFC opened in the United Kingdom, then quickly spread to Canada, Mexico, Jamaica, and Japan. Within a decade, KFC was serving millions worldwide and earning enormous profits from international markets. 4. Acquisition and corporate evolution. In 1986,
KFC was purchased by PepsiCo, a corporate giant with the financial muscle to expand aggressively. PepsiCo placed KFC into its global restaurant division, giving it international supply chain systems, global marketing, and worldwide market access. In 1997, the brand became part of Yum Brands, which also owns Taco Bell and Pizza Hut. This allowed cross-marketing, shared technology, and fast expansion in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. 5. Adapting to local cultures. A key reason for global success was customization. KFC didn't serve the same menu everywhere. It respected local tastes, flavors, and religions, making customers feel represented and understood. What legacy did Colonel Sanders leave behind beyond just fried chicken? Colonel Harlan Sanders left the world far more than a famous fried chicken recipe. His legacy is a powerful combination of inspiration, business leadership, personal values, and philanthropy that continues to influence millions globally, even decades after his death. 1. A symbol of "it's never too late." One of Sanders' greatest legacies is the belief that age should never limit ambition. He was nearly 65, broke, and living on a $105 monthly Social Security check when he began franchising his recipe. Most people think life slows down after 60, but the Colonel proved that a new chapter can begin at any age. This message has inspired countless Americans to chase dreams later in life, making him a symbol of perseverance for generations. 2. The spirit of never giving up. Throughout his life, Sanders faced rejection, failures, job losses, and business setbacks, but he refused to quit. His story teaches the value of resilience, how persistence and hard work can turn ordinary people into icons. Today, motivational speakers, authors, and entrepreneurs use his journey as a real-life example of persistence paying off. 3. A standard of quality and service in the food industry. Sanders believed food should feel like a home meal replacement, warm, comforting, and served with care. He taught franchisees that good food comes with responsibility, hospitality, and consistency. His standards helped shape modern fast food service culture. Even after selling KFC, he personally visited restaurants to ensure his standards were kept, showing his lifelong dedication to excellence. 4. Philanthropy and giving back. Beyond business, Sanders cared deeply about helping others. His legacy of generosity lives on through the Kentucky Fried Chicken Foundation, which provides scholarships, disaster relief, and community support. His belief that success should be shared continues to impact thousands of families every year. 5. A lasting cultural icon. Even decades after his passing, the Colonel remains an American pop culture symbol, instantly recognizable worldwide. His white suit, black string tie, and warm Southern charm created an image that outlived him. He became more than a businessman. He became a brand personality, a cultural figure, and a piece of American history.